On the 28th day of January, in the year 1547, Henry VIII drew his last breath in his chambers at Whitehall Palace. But his death was concealed for 3 crucial days while corrupt advisors manipulated his final testament. In punishing those who had dared to defy him, this is not simply the story of a dying king penning his final wishes. This is the account of the most elaborate and cruel revenge in English royal history, where a tyrant weaponized his own death against enemies, family, and even England's future itself. The most sinister aspect of the testament was how Henry manipulated the line of succession to exclude his dynastic enemies. Even more calculating was how Henry structured the Regency Council that would govern during Edward V's sixth minority. Henry knew Seymour was ambitious and reckless qualities that would guarantee future instability. William Padet, the royal secretary, was included as a counterweight, but he too was known for his manipulative nature and thirst for power. During these 3 days of concealment, documents were destroyed, rivals were removed from key positions, and Henry's revenge machine was set into motion. But his coronation marked the beginning of his suffering, not his power. He was a traumatized child controlled by ambitious regents, who used him as a puppet. Edward Seymour quickly proclaimed himself protector of the realm and Duke of Somerset, assuming near royal power over England. But his arrogance and extreme policies created powerful enemies exactly as Henry had foreseen. The planned instability was when death was finally announced on the 31st of January. The cursed testament was already operational. The first victim of Henry's posthumous, the radical religious policies implemented during Somerset's regency, caused bloody revolts throughout England. The testament also reflected Henry's final religious paranoia. He excluded fervent Catholics from power while simultaneously marginalizing extreme Protestants, creating a vacuum of religious. Instead of appointing experienced and stable regents, he chose ambitious men he knew would enter into mortal conflict with one another. It was like entrusting hungry wolves to guard a lamb. Edward Seymour, brother of he deliberately erased the descendants of his elder sister Margaret Tudor, who had married James IV of Scotland. This exclusion was no accident. It was cold revenge against Scotland and against any Catholic claim to the English throne. In his final days, Henry was surrounded by these corrupt advisors, who harbored their own plans for post-Henry power. Edward Seymour and William Padet worked together to influence the testament's final revisions, ensuring their positions would be strengthened while rivals were marginalized. Henry's actual death on the 28th of January in the year 1547 was kept secret for 3 crucial days. Margaret Tudor had died in the year 1541, but her Scottish descendants represented a constant threat to Henry's ambitions. Prepare to discover how a document of mere pages condemned an entire nation. 2. What they failed to realize was that they had unleashed a curse that would devastate England for decades to come. Henry VIII's testament was not merely a legal document. There existed no clear, stable, or unquestionable succession, precisely the type of situation that could destroy a dynasty. But rather than attempting to stabilize the succession, Henry decided to weaponize it as an instrument of posthumous vengeance. He began obsessively rewriting his testament during his final months, each revision adding new cruelties and calculated exclusions designed to maximize future. It was a dynastic time bomb that exploded in a cascade of executions, religious wars, and premature deaths, obliterating nearly his entire bloodline. Every line of that document had been meticulously crafted to ensure that even in death, Henry would continue controlling. Bloody chaos. Understand the malevolence concealed within Henry's final testament. We must examine his last months of existence. In the autumn of the year 1546, the king was dying slowly, its massive frame consumed by infected ulcers, undiagnosed diabetes, and possibly syphilis. Yet his mind remained razor-sharp, fixated on one ultimate obsession, controlling England even beyond the grave. Henry knew he was leaving behind an explosive dynastic situation. His only legitimate son, Edward, was merely 9 years old. His 2 daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, had been declared bastards and then re-legitimized, according to political convenience. Instabilities. By formally excluding them from the English succession, he guaranteed future dynastic wars between England and Scotland, conflicts that would devastate both countries for generations. Late Jane Seymour, an uncle to Edward V, was positioned to assume significant power. Leadership that would inevitably lead to bloody conflicts over the direction of the English Reformation. Seymour and Potty used this time to consolidate their control over the regency, council, and to make final adjustments to the power structure that would emerge after the official announcement of the royal death. Vengeance was Edward VI himself. The boy king was crowned on the 20th of February in the year 1547, working flawlessly. The Prayer Book Rebellion in the year 1549 cost thousands of lives as Catholics and Protestants slaughtered each other in the name of rival interpretations of Christianity that Henry had deliberately left ambiguous. In October of the year 1549, Somerset was overthrown by John Dudley, Earl of Warwick, in a palace coup that perfectly exemplified how Henry's testament had created systematic. Dudley, now Duke of Northumberland, proved even more manipulative than Somerset. He controlled Edward VI completely, using the young king as an instrument for his own ambitions. But the boy was falling ill rapidly, possibly due to tuberculosis or arsenic poisoning from the medicines of that era. She had been used as a pawn by Northumberland and others, yet paid with her life for others' ambition. The religious persecutions of Mary, known as Bloody Mary, resulted in the execution of approximately 300 Protestants between the years 1555 and 1558. Her growing paranoia led her to execute even close relatives, including her cousin Jane Grey, demonstrating how Henry's testament had poisoned family relationships forever. Her inability to produce heirs meant the throne would pass to Elizabeth, her Protestant half-sister, guaranteeing further religious instability. Elizabeth I ascended the throne facing challenges that were the direct result of her father's testament. She was viewed as illegitimate by Catholics. Elizabeth never married nor bore children, partially due to the trauma of witnessing how marriages and births had destroyed other women in her family. When she died in the year 163, the Tudor dynasty ended completely. Every exclusion, every appointment, every ambiguity was carefully crafted to maximize future conflicts and ensure that his death would be merely the beginning of his revenge, not the end. The king's final revenge was not merely against specific individuals, but against the very concept of peace and stability in England. Henry VIII died as he had lived, as a tyrant who preferred to destroy everything rather than allow others to control what he considered rightfully his. His testament was his masterpiece of cruelty, a document that condemned an entire nation to suffering in the name of petty personal vengeances. More than 450 years later, Henry VIII's testament remains the supreme example of how leaders can weaponize even death against enemies and family. It was a document that transformed dynastic succession into an instrument of the final victim of Henry VIII's revenge. Henry VIII's testament had functioned exactly as planned. He had created her legitimacy, was constantly questioned, and she inherited a country torn by decades. It was revenge on the most systematic and cruel level imaginable. The final irony was that Henry, obsessed with creating a lasting dynasty, had deliberately sabotaged his chances of dynastic success. His need for control and revenge was stronger than his desire to preserve his bloodline. Revealing the fundamentally destructive nature of his personality, Henry VIII's cursed. Mary's marriage to Philip II of Spain in the year 1554 was another consequence of Henry's testament. She married out of dynastic desperation, attempting to produce a Catholic heir who could permanently reverse her father's reforms. And produced. These executions were the direct result of religious polarization that Henry had created through his contradictory reforms and ambiguous testament. Mary also faced constant rebellions, including Wyatt's rebellion in the year. Her death marked another success of Henry's revenge against those who attempted to subvert his will. Mary Tudor ascended the throne determined to reverse Henry VIII's religious reforms and restore Catholicism to England. But her reversal attempts created even greater instability, exactly as Henry had. Throughout her entire reign, Elizabeth faced Catholic conspiracies aimed at replacing her with Mary Stuart, Queen of Scotland, descendant of the Margaret Tudor whom Henry had excluded from his testament. These conspiracies, including the Babington Plot in the year 1586, were direct consequences of Henry's dynastic exclusions. The execution of Mary Stuart on the 8th of February in the year 1587 was the tragic climax of Henry's revenge against the Scottish descendants. Instability. Somerset was subsequently executed in the year 1552, becoming another victim of royal revenge. This alteration of the succession technically constituted treason against Henry VIII's testament, but Northumberland gambled that controlling a weak monarch was preferable to facing Henry's determined daughters. It was a wager that would cost both his life and Jane Grace. Edward V, Sixth died on the 6th of July in the year 1553. He convinced the dying king to alter the succession established by Henry VIII, excluding Mary and Elizabeth in favor of Lady Jane Grey, Northumberland's daughter-in-law. Henry's testament had claimed its first true family victim. Lady Jane Grey was proclaimed queen, but her reign lasted merely 9 days. Mary Tudor, Henry's elder daughter, mobilized popular support and deposed the usurper in July of the year 1553. Jane Grey, a 16-year-old who had been manipulated by ambitious men, was imprisoned and later executed. At 15 years of age, his premature death was the direct result of stress, trauma, and possibly slow poisoning that characterized his brief existence. Jane Grey's execution on the 12th of February in the year 1554 was particularly cruel because she was genuinely innocent. Planned. Mary knew she was viewed as a bastard by many Protestants, creating insecurity that drove her to violent extremes. 1554, which nearly toppled her from the throne. No children. Mary died on the 17th of November in the year 1558 at 42 years of age, possibly from ovarian or uterine cancer, of religious conflict and dynastic instability. Mary died because her very existence represented a constant threat to English stability, exactly as Henry had planned when he excluded her lineage from the succession. Decades of instability, civil war, religious persecution, and premature death that destroyed not only his enemies, but also his own family and dynasty. Testament was not the product of senile madness, but of cold calculation and refined malice. Torture, proving that some hatreds are literally stronger than death itself.